said, I'll be talking about finding freedom between the lines of duality. So Scotland's most famous psychiatrist, Laing, declared that no more fundamental fear exists, but that for ourselves, of each other. Today, I'm going to use literature to combat this belief. Literature is the mirror of society, and therefore is a tool that we can use to better understand each other. Now, within the world of literature, the genre most haunted by fear is the Gothic, featuring shadows, suspense, and mysterious buildings like this one, and crucially, featuring psychological duality. Psychological duality means having two different sides to yourself. It's when someone feels pulled in two opposite directions, like when someone acts one way in public, but behaves very differently behind closed doors. In literature, this idea is often presented as something quite scary. This, for example, is the same woman, yet changes in perspective create vastly different impressions. Similarly, when duality is misunderstood or misrepresented, it can appear much more threatening than it actually is. So over the course of my degree, I've been repeatedly drawn to the internal conflicts of Scottish literature. So when I decided to research duality, it proved to be the perfect terrain. My original research traced duality over the course of 200 years through 4 case studies, but time constraints mean I cannot stand here and regurgitate the entire 11,000 words, lucky for you all. So I've narrowed down the case studies from 4 to 2. Now, whether you like to admit it or not, we all, to some extent, put on a front. We all wear a mask. As said by Laing, everyone in some measure wears a mask. But if duality is natural, what is it that makes it so frightening? In a word, repression. So I propose that duality only adopts a more terrifying, sinister complexion when subject to the external pressures of societal repression. When we remove this repression, we find that duality is actually a natural, benign, and harmless quality that's present in all of us. So here is the procedure that I'll follow in order to prove this hypothesis. So I'll give an example of duality, show that when repression is added, it becomes harmful, and then remove the repression, and we see that it's actually harmless. So ultimately, without repression, duality is harmless. So sit back, relax, and allow me to peel back the mask and demonstrate that duality is not something that needs to be feared. My first case study we will examine is Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The date is 1886, and we're in the murky streets of Victorian London. For those unfamiliar with this tale, Dr. Jekyll is an esteemed scientist who cares deeply about his appearance in society. He mixes together a potion that gives him a dual identity, that of himself and that of Mr. Hyde, a mask that allows him to indulge in his more offensive instincts without being recognized. So Jekyll, in the form of Mr. Hyde, goes around town in the small hours of the morning, trampling young children, assaulting civilians, and generally wreaking havoc upon society. As you can see from these cover pages, Hyde was not a very attractive fellow, or at least he wasn't presented as such. But what if we look between the lines of duality within which Hyde is depicted? We later discover that Hyde was born from a happier side of Jekyll's personality. He quotes, "such as made the happiness of many." So basically, Jekyll used to have a cheerful side, but because of his imperious desire to carry his head high before the public, he believes this positivity to be ungentlemanly. He calls it the worst of my faults. So here we have the cycle of repression. In order to uphold a certain appearance among society, Jekyll suppresses the happier side of his personality, and thus Hyde is born. Consequently, the more Jekyll seeks to appear to be good, the more evil he makes Hyde. Apologies for the spoiler, but Jekyll's story does not end well. Overcome by horror at his mutated existence, he takes his own life. But if we remove this external repression, we're left wondering whether Hyde actually is a monster. If we all have a Hyde within us, perhaps the real monster is the external world of repression, reputation, and appearance that forces duality into hiding. So Stevenson externalized psychological duality. Hyde is a physically distinct being to Jekyll. But what does duality look like in more recent literature? Graham McRae Burnett depicts duality as an internal experience that takes place behind the eyes of the characters in his 2021 novel Case Study. The story revolves around a young woman who assumes a fictional identity to investigate a psychologist. This young woman, who's the narrator, is uncomfortable in her own skin. Her mother causes her to feel scared of everything, confessing that quiet despair is the best I can hope for. She's so ashamed of herself that she doesn't even reveal her name, and she remains the anonymous narrator. To give you a sense of what her mother is like, she declares at one point in the text, "A man drunk was frowned upon, but an inebriated woman was the very definition of degeneracy and merited no sympathy for whatever ill fortune she brought upon herself." Charming. At a young age, the narrator's repression extends from the verbal to the physical, as her mother purchases a set of reins that she uses to physically restrain the narrator. So oppression dictates her every movement, preventing any sort of self-expression. She says she is constrained by a sense of decorum, by the thought of my mother peering over my shoulder. However, remember how I said she creates a fictional identity? Well, the mask she creates is called Rebecca, and it's Rebecca that allows the narrator to express the parts of herself that had previously remained hidden. She demands, quite rightly, why should I not, for once, be a Rebecca? Rebecca embraces the world instead of rejecting it. She dismisses the narrator's original mistrust of other people, instead focusing on enjoying things for their own sake. Rebecca, like Hyde, demonstrates that masks aren't just for concealing. They can be a route to liberation from an oppressive sense of self. So where societal repression molds Hyde into a figure of evil, acceptance of the narrator's transition to Rebecca makes her a symbol of freedom. It's this acceptance that allows her to march forth from the darkness of her previous identity. So these two case studies show that when duality is treated as something to be feared, when duality is not treated as something to be feared, but instead embraced, it becomes a path to self-expression and liberation. But why is my research relevant? Why should you care? Fear-mongering is a powerful political tool. It's being used as we speak to fuel xenophobia, far-right nationalism, and discrimination across the globe. Trump is the perfect example of the damaging impact of repression on duality. He's slicing up the world, drawing up ideological, political, and racial boundaries, and he's spearheading a campaign of mistrust. So amidst this global political turmoil, it's crucial that we reach across our differences and learn to coexist. Instead of seeing each other as illegal aliens that are coming over here to take us over, as these gentlemen so eloquently put it, let's use my theory to lay the foundation for societal acceptance. If you take away one thing from this talk, let it be this: the more we understand about each other, the less there is to fear. Thank you.